When you hear the name Joy Division, what do you think of? You probably think about the band and their singer, or you think about their iconic first album, either for the music or that sick drip. Some people might even think about New Order and the success they had after Joy Division had disbanded.
How does it feel to treat me like you do?
But not many people think or talk about Joy Division's second album, Closer. Which is a shame, because in my opinion, their second album deserves a lot more recognition. In this video, I want to talk about why I personally love Joy Division's second album, the story of Joy Division, and why I believe Closer deserves the same respect as their first album, if not more. Before I can talk about this album, I have to give some important context and information about the band and what they were up to. This is an album where the story of the band matters a lot. This knowledge can completely change your understanding of the album, so I highly recommend you listen to me yapping about the band for a little bit, even if you already know some of these things. On the 4th of June 1976, Peter Hook, Bernard Sumner, Terry Mason and around 40 other people attended the historic Sex Pistols gig at the Lesser Free Trade Hall in Manchester. This was the first time that Manchester had properly been exposed to British punk. The British punk invasion influenced a lot of people, including many future artists who were at the same gig, including Pete Shelley, Howard Devoto, Mark E. Smith, Morrissey and more. There are also a lot of people who claim to have been there, but are probably lying. Looking at you, Tony Wilson. This gig inspired many people in the crowd to start bands. We would probably assume these people got inspired by this gig because the experience was incredible, but it's actually quite the contrary. When asked about it by the Manchester Evening News, Peter Hook said, and I quote, "It sounded awful. The attitude was like they were messing about on stage. They seemed to be taking it not very seriously, laughing at us. I literally thought, I could do that." So, when they got back from the gig, they formed a band that same evening. Bernard Sumner started playing guitar, and Peter Hook bought a bass guitar. Terry Mason played the drums. The band was still lacking a vocalist, so they placed an advertisement in a local musical hub. Ian Curtis responded, who they knew from attending shows, and was hired immediately without audition. Sumner explained that they knew Ian was alright to get on with, and that's what we based the whole group on. If we liked someone, they were in. The band was briefly called Stiff Kittens, but then settled on Warsaw shortly before their first gig, a reference to the David Bowie song Warsaw of his 1977 album Low. 2 days before their very first gig, supporting the Buzzcocks and more, they replaced drummer Terry Mason with Tony Tabak, which sounds like a name straight out of a comic book. Shortly after the gig, Tony was replaced by Steve Brotherdale. Uneasy with Brotherdale's aggressive personality, the band fired him soon after some sessions. Driving home from the studio, they pulled over and asked Brotherdale to check on a flat tire. When they got out of the car, they drove off. Fair to say, they thought the guy was a kook. I don't know about that. He looks like a nice bloke to me. The band eventually recruited Stephen Morris as their new drummer. Who responded to a wanted ad posted in a local music shop. In early 1978, the band changed their name again. They were constantly battling confusion with the name of London punk band Warsaw Pact, so they renamed themselves Joy Division, taken from the name of a sexual slavery wing of a Nazi concentration camp. Very edgy. On the 3rd of June 1978, Joy Division released their debut EP, And Ideal for Living. The sound of this EP is still very punky, although it does sound dark and moody at times. The cover art is once again a very edgy reference to World War II. Even though this EP was released in 1978, all the songs were recorded on the 14th of December 1977. By the time this EP got released, the band was already experimenting with their sound. On 27 December, in a car during the drive home from an anti-climactic gig at the Hope and Anchor in London, An angry and disappointed Ian Curtis had a fight with Bernard Sumner over a sleeping bag. Bernard Sumner wanted to keep himself warm because he was sick with the flu, but Ian kept tugging at it and eventually took the sleeping bag for himself. When Bernard tried to get it back, Ian suddenly lashed out and started punching everything around him. The band sensed that something was wrong and they took Ian to the hospital. There he was officially diagnosed with epilepsy. This was Curtis' first recognized severe epileptic seizure.
Ian had a fit in the car. We had to take him to Luton Hospital. At which point Steve got really upset because we were going to go to the services.
To get some fags.
To get some fags.
It was a no-smoking hospital anyway, so the fact that I'd, nicked his fags was a complete waste of time.
Unfortunately, this was not the last time Ian would suffer a severe epileptic seizure. He would continue to have fits on and off stage, and it heavily impacted his life. A few months later, on the 16th of April 1979, Ian Curtis' life would change forever. His wife, Deborah Curtis, who he'd been married to since 1975, gave birth to their daughter, Natalie Curtis. On June 15, 1979, Joy Division released their first studio album, Unknown Pleasures. This album was recorded and mixed in April 1979 with producer Martin Hannett. Peter Hook and Bernard Sumner were not happy with how the album sounded. They did not like Martin Hannett's mixing and much preferred their loud, more aggressive live sound. Ian Curtis and Stephen Morris, on the other hand, did like what Martin Hannett had done to the songs. Martin Hannett's production, combined with the new, darker, more somber songs, made this album sound very spacious and atmospheric. They were no longer a punk band. Martin Hannett's production incorporated things like echoes, digital delays, samples of bottles breaking, and much more. Peter Saville, who designed the cover art, used that one particular image that you've seen 1,000 times. The cover art is based on an image of radio waves from a pulsar CP 1919. The album was extremely well received, and the band continued to play many gigs in the UK but also in Europe. All this touring took a toll on Ian Curtis, who continued to drink, smoke, and maintain an irregular sleeping pattern. So he's basically just like me. He basically did all the things the doctors told him not to do. This choice of lifestyle worsened his epileptic condition. The medication that he was taking for epilepsy also gave him side effects like mood swings and a worsening mental state. Ian Curtis had several epileptic fits on stage but kept performing. His epilepsy was so bad that he was too afraid to hold his own daughter, fearing for her safety. To make matters even worse, Ian Curtis began cheating on his wife with Belgian journalist
Annick Honoré.
By early 1980, Curtis' marriage to Deborah was falling apart. She had commenced divorce proceedings because Ian kept in contact with
Honoré.
after she asked him not to. Ian Curtis felt extremely guilty about leaving his wife and daughter. At one point, he even asked Sumner to decide for him if he should go with Annick or if he should remain with his wife. Bernard Sumner, being a sane person, refused to answer this question. In March of 1980, Joy Division started recording their second studio album, Closer. Half of the songs are written during the latter half of 1979, and the other, more synthesizer-heavy songs were written in early 1980. While the band worked on Closer, Ian Curtis told Bernard Sumner that doing this album felt very strange, because he felt that all his words were writing themselves. He also said he had this terrible claustrophobic feeling that he was in a whirlpool, being pulled down and drowning. Recording the album was very tough for Ian Curtis, as his epilepsy condition was out of control. Get it? Control? Yeah, it's very funny. His bandmates constantly had to check on him, and on one occasion, Peter Hook found Ian Curtis unconscious on the floor of the studio's toilets. He had a seizure which caused him to hit his head on the sink. Martin Hannett once again produced the album, and Bernard Sumner and Peter Hook were not happy with the sound. Martin Hannett didn't care though. The album cover was designed by Martin Atkins and Peter Saville, and features photographs of the
Appiani
Family tomb in
Genoa's
monumental cemetery of
Staglieno.
The band's manager Rob Gredden showed the band several photos by Bernard Pierre Wolf. Being the edgelords that they were, they of course picked the grimmest looking one. Trigger warning, the story will now involve very heavy topics like suicide, so keep that in mind. On 6 April 1980, Ian Curtis attempted suicide by overdosing on his anti-seizure medication. Joy Division was scheduled to perform a gig on April 8 at the Derby Hall in Bury, but Ian Curtis was too sick to perform. The band's manager managed to get some other artists on board to fill in. Ian himself went on to perform 2 songs mid-set before permanently disappearing backstage. Despite the effort, the crowd was furious. He threw bottles on stage and caused a riot. Fun fact, Mark Burgess, who went on to perform Chameleons, was part of the crowd. Joy Division had toured in Europe, done a few shows across the UK. Now it was time for the United States! An exciting tour far from home right before the release of their second album. The tour was set to kick off on the 21st of May with the first show in New York. On 17 May, Ian returned to his home and pleaded to his wife to drop the impending divorce suit. After a discussion, he asked his wife if he could spend the night alone. After his wife left, he watched Werner Herzog's film Strosjek, I think that's how you pronounce it, and listened to Iggy Pop's 1977 album The Idiot. That same night, right before the band were due to depart for America, Ian Curtis hung himself. On July 18, Closer was finally released, 2 months after Ian's death. The 3 remaining members formed a new band together with Gillian Gilbert called New Order. It's time to put on our tinfoil hats because I'm going to theorize a little bit. Keep in mind that the things I'm going to say are just my opinion. There's no way to verify if any of this is true, but I strongly believe Ian Curtis knew he was going to die soon when he wrote the songs for Closer. There's a bit of evidence that supports my theory. Ian's widow, Deborah, wrote in her book that Ian has always had an obsession with dying young. He looked up to people who died at their peak, like Jim Morrison, and romanticized an early death. He was also a big fan of the song Rock and Roll Suicide from David Bowie. Ian also made an agreement, most likely in early 1979, with the band. The band would have to disband or change its name if any of the 4 members left. Although Ian was happy with the second album, for the most part, he actually had little interest in making a second album. He had told Deborah that when Transmission and Unknown Pleasures had been released, he had achieved his ambitions. There was nothing else for him to do. All he ever intended was to have 1 album and 1 single pressed. He also told her he wanted to leave Joy Division and join the circus. I swear I'm not making that up. Ian was a very strange man. He also wanted to open a bookshop in Holland after the Bury gig. He also quit the band for 1 day during recording sessions for Closer and told the manager he wanted to open a bookshop in Bournemouth. There's also his affair that had left him feeling extremely guilty, and the upcoming divorce affected him a lot. He also felt very bad for his daughter. And lastly, his epilepsy was getting worse and worse. He would feel ashamed whenever he had a fit on stage, and his fear came true when the crowd started a riot at the Bury gig due to his absence. He was terrified of how the US crowd would react to his condition. He was also scared of flying, and the band were going to travel to the US by plane, so that didn't help his case. I think by the time Ian started recording Closer, his depression had gone so bad that he knew it was going to end it all soon. The trip to the US was simply the nail in the coffin.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Again, there's no way to know if this is true. We will probably never know how Ian was truly feeling. Anyways, I now want to discuss the tracks on the album and give some of my personal thoughts. The album starts off with Atrocity Exhibition, which is a sick name and it's a great track, albeit an odd one. I like to make fun of Bernard Sumner and Peter Hook for crying about Martin Hannett's excellent production, but Peter Hook was kinda right here. Hannett really did make the guitar sound like someone strangling a cat. The drums on this song sound really unique too. They almost sound kind of tribal in a way. The title of this song comes from a book titled The Atrocity Exhibition by J.G. Gallard. When asked if the song was inspired by the book, Ian responded, "Actually no, I'd written the lyrics way before I read Atrocity Exhibition and I was looking for a title because sometimes I just can't think up a good title. Anyway, I just saw this title at the beginning of one of his books and I thought that it fitted with the ideas of the lyrics. Sometime after I wrote the lyrics and the song had been established in our set, I read the book and it's by pure coincidence that some of the ideas in the book are similar to some of the ideas in the lyrics." So basically, Ian was a fucking poser and he pulled a Kate Bush on us. Jokes aside, the lyrics on here are very grim and the meaning of the song is unclear. I personally think the lyrics are very similar to one of the songs off of Unknown Pleasures, Shadowplay. I think the lyrics are about how Ian Curtis feels about performing and how he's suffering and misunderstood, while the crowd just views him purely as entertainment, a stage figure. Musically, the song sounds very weird and it took me quite a few listens to get used to it. I definitely would not recommend this song to someone who hasn't heard at least a few other Joy Division songs before. Fun fact! Bernard Sumner and Peter Hook swapped instruments on this track and Peter plays guitar while Bernard plays the bass. The second track on this album is called Isolation. It's the most popular and accessible song on the album and it's not hard to tell why. I personally love the bass line on here. It's very simple but sounds very uplifting and kind of makes you want to move around. The song also features these happy, ethereal sounding synths. So the song sounds very happy, but when you listen to the lyrics, it straight up sounds like a suicide note. "Mother, I tried, please believe me, I'm doing the best that I can. I'm ashamed of the things I've been put through, I'm ashamed of the person I am." This song is most likely about Ian feeling ashamed and isolated out of his marriage with Deborah. The song is very bleak, but it's also very danceable. The third track is called Passover. The name is in reference to a story from the Bible where enslaved Israelites painted their doors with lamb's blood to protect them from the final deadly plague of Egypt, as seen in that one South Park episode. Unlike the second track, this song does not feature any synthesizers and is one of the earlier guitar-driven songs. There is a reference to the story from the Bible in the lyrics, but most of the lyrics are very vague and are likely in reference to Ian's personal thoughts at the time. There's very much a sense of guilt and helplessness in this song. The lyrics, "People would change for no reason at all, it's happening all of the time, can I go on with this train of events, disturbing and purging my mind? Back out of my duties, when it's all said and done, I know that I'll lose, every time." Sound like someone who's just given up on everything. The fourth and least popular track on this album is called Colony. The track starts off with just Bernard's guitar and a few seconds later Peter Hook's bass and Stephen's drums come in. The bass line on this song is very simple and repetitive, but it works really well, in my opinion. The song is overall a bit repetitive, which might be the reason why it's the least popular song on the album, but in my opinion it sounds really good. The lyrics are, once again, most likely about him mentally hurting his wife. The sound from broken homes, we used to always meet here. As he lays asleep, she takes him in her arms. Some things I have to do, but I don't mean you harm. The drummer Stephen Morris has said that this song is probably his favorite Joy Division song. I've always loved this song too, and I must say I'm a little bit surprised to see that this is the least popular song on here. The fifth and final track from side A of this record is A Means to an End. Stephen Morris said that this track started with just the bass riff, and you can definitely tell that the bass was the foundation here. Peter Hook plays this simple, groovy, high bass line throughout the song, and it sounds incredible. The drums sound simple on the song, but complement the bass line very well. Bernard's guitar riffs on here sound great, and he's even got a guitar solo on here, which is very rare for him. Lyrically, this song is very pessimistic. The choruses consist of "I always look to you" and "I put my trust in you." I think these are directed at either Deborah, or a close friend, or at God or life itself. Either way, the song itself sounds very groovy, despite the negative lyrics. The sixth and final happy track on this album is called Heart and Soul. Now I know it makes no sense for me to call this and the before mentioned tracks happy, but it will make some more sense later. Heart and Soul is another one of these songs where the bass line is the foundation. The bass line on here is also very simple. It's so easy in fact that even I can play it, so that says a lot. But it sounds very good, and its repetitive makes you want to dance along. Stephen Moore's drums complement the bass very well. This track features a guitar as well as atmospheric synths. The guitar riffs on here are very simple and are actually played by Ian Curtis. This is one of the two tracks in Joy Division's discography where Ian plays guitar. Bernard was responsible for the synths on this track. Ian's vocals on here sound very haunting, even more haunting and low-pitched than usual. This track, despite the haunting vocals, does not actually sound that depressing, and in my opinion is pretty fun. Well, I hope you had fun listening to Heart and Soul, because that was the very last song that had even a hint of happiness in it.
So this is permanent, love shattered pride. What once was innocent turned on its side. A cloud hangs over.
24 Hours is an intense track that lyrically and musically sounds like someone's last 24 hours. It's very much about time, running out of time, and about longing and regretting for what once was. The bass and drums sound very intense on this song, and the guitar sounds unnerving. The bass and drums really drive this track forward and give it this marching tempo. Ian's lyrics and vocals sounds like he's given up. It's one of my favorite vocal performances ever. Something about the way he sings on here is just chilling. On Unknown Pleasures there were quite a few songs where Ian raised his voice to convey emotion. A perfect example of this would be the track New Dawn Fades. But on Closer this never happens. Ian never snaps out of it, but somehow his vocals on this song sound more intense than on any other song. The lyrics on this song are the darkest on the album in my opinion. Just for one moment, I heard somebody call, looked beyond the day in hand, there's nothing there at all. And now that I've realized how it's all gone wrong, gotta find some therapy, this treatment takes too long. As someone who struggles with mental health, I've personally never heard a song that describes the feeling of depression so well. It's incredible. Track number 8 is called The Eternal. It's a slower, more atmospheric song that features a piano and reverb-laden drums. Bernard Sumner did the piano riff on here and it sounds very haunting. With lyrics like, procession moves on, the shouting is over, praise to the glory of loved ones now gone. I've always looked at this song as a funeral. This makes sense in my head as the previous track sounded like someone's final day before ending it all. This is one of the few songs where Ian actually told his bandmates what the song is about, and I'll reveal that information to you soon. final song on Closer is called Decades. It's once again a more atmospheric track featuring synths, which sound beautiful yet haunting. If the lyrics on here weren't so depressing, the synths could have sounded uplifting or positive. Lyrically, I've always interpreted this song as Ian Curtis talking about himself in third person. Here are the young men, the weight on their shoulders. Here are the young men, but where have they been? Weary inside, now our hearts lost forever. Can't replace the fear or the thrill of the chase. In my opinion, the lyrics make it sound like this troubled person has either passed away or is dealing with trauma. The chorus consists of one line, "Where have they been?" which sounds very haunting, especially if you keep in mind that this track came out after Ian's suicide. I know that how I interpret the songs is most likely very wrong. In fact, people online think the song Decades is about World War II, which makes total sense, but I could not find anything about someone close to Ian talking about what the song is about, so it's most likely just speculation. There's one guy who thinks the song is about Ian Curtis calling other artists like Aqua and the Bunnymen posers, which is really funny because that would mean that Decades is basically a diss track. Again, I couldn't find anything that backs this theory. Remember how I said that the meaning behind the lyrics on The Eternal are actually known? Ian told his bandmates that the song is about a kid with Down syndrome, whose life doesn't seem to change at all. Very different from how I thought about the song. At the end of the day, the meaning doesn't really matter. Because by pure coincidence or not, this album sounds very bleak, and the songs paint a dark picture of Ian's outlook on life. I think the album is just as good, if not better, than Unknown Pleasures, but I completely understand why it's less popular. Closer can be an uncomfortable listen, whereas Unknown Pleasures, despite the sad lyrics and songs, has got a lot of highlights and has more easily accessible songs than Closer. In terms of gloom and bleakness, Closer beats Unknown Pleasures by a long shot, and that's saying something. Give this album a listen if you haven't already, but listen to Unknown Pleasures first before listening to this album. Hopefully, you'll love both records just like me. Thanks for watching.
Each ritual showed up the door for our wanderings. Opened and shut, then slammed in our face.